Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and today we have another What Have We Been Watching for the last week, and there are some big hitters in this episode. So if you are new here, as always, consider dropping a like, a subscription, stay involved. We have a lot going on here on the channel the next few weeks because we are in the thick of awards season. But let's kick things off. We both saw the newest Hayao Miyazaki film, The Boy and the Heron. You for a second time, me for a first time. So I'll let you go first. We've heard your thoughts once before. How have they changed? And I guess it's been 3 months since the last time you saw it.
So I saw this film at TIFF, and I really enjoyed it. Now, Hayao Miyazaki is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, so a new Studio Ghibli movie is always an event for me. I had not expected there to be a new one when he announced he was retiring in 2013 with The Wind Rises, and I've been anticipating this ever since it was first announced. I loved it at TIFF, and I didn't give it a 10 out of 10 then. I gave it a 9, and I was hoping on a rewatch it might go up to a 10. You know, the first time I was like, maybe I missed some stuff. It was a bit of a confusing film, and I wanted to see if some things would just click into place. And actually, kind of the opposite happened. I still really liked the movie, but on a rewatch, I guess I got that it wasn't that I just didn't understand things in the first watch. It's that these things aren't meant to be understood. As an experience, I still really enjoy this movie. It is beautifully crafted. The music is stunning. The characters are entertaining to watch. The designs of these things, especially the wari-waris, those little puffy white creatures that float, I love it. The parakeets, so good, so funny. But that said, there's so many unanswered questions, and the plot just does not really make a lot of sense. So as an experience, this is a great film, but you really have to let go of your expectations to get any form of story. Hayao Miyazaki has been very loose with his stories in the past. Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, those are weird, abstract movies, and yet there's always a clear narrative that's going on. There's always a clear idea of where are we in the story, what is happening, what does everyone want. And The Boy and the Heron drops those narrative ideas entirely in favor of what feels very much like dream logic. It's been described that The Boy and the Heron is very much like if David Lynch directed a Hayao Miyazaki movie. I would completely agree. And so while I really did enjoy it, some of the things I hoped would be cleared up on a rewatch just got more confusing for me. So I'm dropping this one from a 9 out of 10 down to an 8 out of 10.
Did I necessarily get what The Boy and the Heron was going for? No. Did I think it featured some beautiful animation, amazing voice acting work, and presented some fun and interesting themes? Yeah. I've never really been a member of the Studio Ghibli hive. I've liked some movies, but I've never thought they were like the peak of animation, as many of my peers like yourself do. But I did think The Boy and the Heron kind of falls in line with what I think about of most of their output. I very much appreciated, respected, and admired the craft that went into telling this story, but I left kind of feeling empty, distant, and not as engaged as I probably wanted to be. But to give props to this movie, because I did enjoy it for the most part. On a technical level, the voice cast in this is amazing. I saw the English dub here because I was very interested to see what is Robert Pattinson doing. I avoided all trailers. I'd never heard any of it ahead of time. I had saw like some stills, and I think I saw the trailer with no audio once, like on my Twitter feed. So I was really interested to see like what is he doing, because I've heard raids, and yeah, his voice has been stuck in my head since I saw this movie about a week ago. I had to do about a 6, 7, 8 hour drive the other day, and on the whole drive was the day after I watched the movie, and all I could hear was like some of his lines that the movie just engraved into my head. The rest of the cast I felt very much fit the roles that they were playing. The animation looks great, and to give props where props are due, you talked a lot about the score in this movie, and I think the score is very, very well done. Is it sometimes a little overbearing? Maybe, but I liked what it was trying to do.
I think it's the opposite of overbearing. It's so minimalist. It's
at the beginning,
like a piano.
But at the ends,
I guess they bring the strings in a little bit, but I never feel like it's overbearing. It's really simple.
Which is fair. Like I said, I really did enjoy the score, but I am a little bit lower on this. I'm a very, very, very strong 6 out of 10.
I will say I really like the themes of Hayao Miyazaki wanting to pass the torch. He's talking about being this creator at the end of his life. How do you cope with that? How do you move on? It's interesting because Hayao Miyazaki is both the child and the granduncle. He is represented in both of those characters because the child is him losing his mother in the Second World War. Then the old man is also him. I think that's the most interesting thing to analyze about this movie. But yes, I like this one a lot. Unfortunately, I don't love it, but I do really like it. And I'm happy that Hayao Miyazaki will be making another one after this. The next thing that I saw this week was Maestro.
Ooh.
I loved Maestro. Not only is this a stunning directorial achievement from Bradley Cooper, who steps up his filmmaking game in every way from A Star is Born. Now, I will say A Star is Born does remain the superior film because of the screenplay, the emotional connection with it. But that said, Maestro, as a directing achievement, is fantastic. The way the camera floats from place to place, you would think that Spielberg wasn't just the producer of this, you'd think he had a hand in the direction. That's not me accusing Spielberg of being a ghost director on this, because I think Bradley Cooper can do this all on his own. The performances, specifically from Carey Mulligan, are fantastic. Carey Mulligan ruled every single scene she was in, and Bradley Cooper also bringing more layers than I typically expect from these types of biopic performances. I felt like I saw the human being that Bernstein was, and not just the list of achievements. And that's my favorite thing about Maestro. So many films that do a womb-to-tomb biopic just focus on what did this person do? What were their biggest achievements? What did they accomplish? And the thing with Maestro is it has no interest in that. Big events in Bernstein's life will take place in the background. They talk about West Side Story as like a potential project that he has going on the side. Most of the scenes we see him in, we're not going into the orchestra with him. We're seeing him at home afterwards. And that's what's so fascinating. It is not trying to mythologize or build a story around, wow, Leonard Bernstein is a great American who put America on the scene for classical music. It's not interested in that. What it's interested in is telling the story of a family, telling the story of someone who wants more and more, and telling a love story, a very complicated love story between a man who cannot be faithful and the woman who stood beside him despite all of that. Why did she stay beside him? Those questions are pretty fascinating. So big surprise for me. Gotta say, last year, Tar turned a fictional character into someone you would believe was a real person. Meanwhile, Maestro turned a real person into someone that you would believe is a fictional character ripped right out of a 1950s Golden Age Hollywood classic. I loved Maestro. I'm giving this one a 10 out of 10.
I'll just touch on it a little bit. I did watch this all the way back in October. I thought it had some dazzling cinematography, classical music, and it had a giant Snoopy, so how could this really go wrong for
Great
me?
scene.
But
oh my god, I loved that.
I love that scene too, but I was just really sad to report that I kind of was let down by Bradley Cooper's Maestro. As I said above, the cinematography, it's immaculate. The black and white is for sure the highlight, but when the film transitions to color, it just loses no style points. I think that Libatique has some of his best work in his career in this movie, which may be a bold statement, but I sure do believe it. There are some transitions in this film that are some of my favorite of the year as a whole. The makeup work, the costumes, production design are all super impressive, but for me, it all just falls down to this script, which is just super boring. You talked about how you appreciate how they kept some of the achievements in the background. To me, I wish maybe not to focus on them, but to give some more life to them, because what they did decide to focus on to me was just unengaging. Sure, Cooper and Carey Mulligan are turning in some great performances. Mulligan gets one amazing Oscar clip scene, but Cooper is filled with energy as Bernstein throughout this film, but the true highlight of this performance comes when he gets to conduct, which I just wish we got more of. It's just very sparse in this movie. I feel like his direction as well as his performance is on full force during these very limited scenes, to where we get more of the acting scenes about his backstory, his life, his inability to be faithful, which just feel very routine, that we've all seen these scenes play out. We've seen this performance many times before, and the real shining is what we get very little of in this movie.
That's fair enough. We've definitely seen this type of movie done a million times, and that's kind of why I guess I appreciated that it went smaller than normal. Anyways, let's move on to the next one. You got to see Dream Scenario finally. I saw this one back at TIFF. I loved it, and I'd love to hear what you thought.
Similar to our lead character inside the film, I found Dream Scenario to be very engaging and captivating at first, but it very much overstays its welcome in a negative way as we get later into the film. Nick Cage delivers a great leading performance, which combines his humorous and his dramatic acting chops, I think, in a great way. As I mentioned before, the first 40 minutes or so of this film is so captivating. I was so engaged. I was loving everything. But once we hit that interaction with Molly and the ramifications of that and the start of the cancel culture aspects of this film is where I felt it became very messy and unfocused, which maybe was the point, but for me very much did not work and connect with me. The ad sequence very much just took me out of this film and left kind of a not good taste, and they kept going back to it throughout the remaining part of the film, which I get what they're going for, but it very much just did not click with me. The resolution of how this movie ends, as well as the narrative, just becomes very jumbled and I think sluggish. The pacing falls off a cliff once we hit this point of the film, but overall my love of the first half very much outweighs how I thought about the second half and the underwhelming finish to give this a very solid or weak 7 out of 10.
I gotta disagree with you with the ending being a fall off a cliff in terms of pacing. I thought that it keeps up the pacing the entire time, but there's a very deliberate switch there where suddenly this character who was a reluctant celebrity tries to force it, and then things start to fall apart for him. To me, it's a commentary on the nature of celebrity, less on cancel culture and more on everyone who is kind of thrust into the limelight, and then when they suddenly become accustomed to it, that's going to fall away from them, and they're going to spend the rest of their life trying to hit that feeling again, that feeling of being loved, that feeling of having their 15 minutes of fame. It's a tragedy where so many people are going to be stuck chasing that dream over and over and over, and it'll never happen for them again. Nicolas Cage is fantastic here. The comedy is wonderful. I said when I first watched this that this is like the most A24 movie that there ever has been, because it's got elements of comedy, it's got elements of family drama, and it's got elements of horror, especially in those dreams where Nick Cage is playing a killer. It has everything. I really, really appreciate Dream Scenario, and I'm sad to hear that it didn't quite click for you the same way it did for me.
It did for the most part. It was just certain stuff where they were going for in that second half. I don't go into spoilers because I do very much recommend going out to watch this. I know it's near the end of its theatrical run. I know A24 just made a deal with HBO Max, so it should be on Max like within a week or so. Definitely check out when it goes there. Nick Cage, he's great. Michael Cera, I always like seeing him pop up and stuff, even if he doesn't really do much here. After her pretty awful performance last year in Blonde, Julia Nicholson gets to give a really good role in this film, so positives.
This week I watched Still, a Michael J. Fox movie, which is the critics' frontrunner for documentary right now, which means it's definitely not going to get nominated for the Oscar. That said, I drafted this onto my Filmball team, so I had to give it a watch, and it was pretty good. There's a lot of films that have come out recently that are documentaries kind of showcasing the career of an actor, especially an actor who has suffered either illness or injury. For example, Val came out a few years ago. That was the documentary about Val Kilmer, showing his life, his career up until the loss of his voice. There was also Love, Antosha a few years ago, which told the story of Anton Yelchin, his career, his big movies up until his untimely death. Still, a Michael J. Fox movie is following in that. It tells the story of Michael J. Fox, how he got his career started, his big films along the way, up until his diagnosis with Parkinson's and till now. It's a well-done film. It takes you through the hits. It tells you everything you want to know. And what I will say I really appreciate is that despite the content of the movie being formulaic, I mean, I just described two other movies that are exactly the same, just with different actors. What makes this movie stand out a little bit more is that it is really well crafted. Instead of just doing talking heads interviews, as they do in so many of these films, they go out of their way to do recreations, film little moments, and tell the story through actors rather than just having it be old video footage and talking heads. I really appreciated that, but that said, it is still a pretty formulaic doc in the end, and I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10.
Well, to follow that up, I watched The Story of Joseph, the World's First Cuck, also known as Journey to Bethlehem, but in all seriousness,
you're going to get us canceled for that one. That's a good one.
But in all seriousness, I went to see this because the trailer, it looked very Kino. Antonio Banderas as King Herod himself seemed like it would lend itself to loads of meme potential. What I got was not exactly that, but I'm not upset with the product. The decision to tell this story via musical was a very bold choice that I think lends itself to a lot of possibilities. The music itself, sorry, is very basic. It's just generic Christian pop music, but some of the lyrics are very, very catchy. The dance numbers were very entertaining. The dialogue in this movie is very, very base level and corny as you can expect, but that's what I came for. Antonio Banderas sure is overacting. It's maybe not the most Kino version of how he could be overacting, but it was a very fun way to see unfold. Overall, this movie is solid. It's not awful, it's not great, but it's sure worth my 90 minutes. A solid positive 5 out of 10.
I rewatched Asteroid City this week. I liked it a lot more. When I first saw the film, I said to myself, I'm going to need to check this out a second time just to make sure I'm not missing anything, because I feel like there's more to this than I'm getting out of it right now. And there definitely was. On a rewatch, I found myself in tears. Not only is this a stunningly crafted film in the production design, the cinematography, the music, but it tells a beautiful story about art and the way that we shield our hearts from tragedy, from grief. The way that an artist might tell a story about the loss of a loved one and bury it under so many layers that you can barely tell that it's genuine anymore. It is possibly Wes Anderson's most personal film. I don't know what he's been going through to tell a story like this, but it comes from the heart. It also has to do a lot with the meaninglessness of life. These big moments in the world, they don't matter. Alien descends from the sky, and what does it change in the story? Nothing. Life just keeps going on as meaningless as before. I'm moving this one up to a very light 10 out of 10. Almost a 9, but I'm going to stick with a 10 because I think this is going to get better with every subsequent watch that I go back to.
To close out the movies I watched in this past week, I will end on a giant stinker, which was Silent Night. The lack of dialogue is an interesting idea, however, made me feel very unengaged, and this was just incredibly boring throughout. Our lead in this movie makes so many stupid and bonehead decisions that often just made me like, why am I watching this movie? When the action comes, the pace does pick up a little bit, but it's not like the show-stopping work that we're used to from John Woo movies. To me, it was just very tame and whatever action that you would see in just any generic action movie that you would go watch on a random night. The staircase sequence that happens later in the film was super well done. That was my one bright spot of this movie that overall just I could care less about, and I'll probably forget about it after we talk about it today.
Time for my speed run now. First up, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, the miniseries on Netflix. I love Scott Pilgrim. It's one of the first things that really got me into film. As a Canadian kid, it was amazing to see a film that was proud about being set in Toronto. I'd never seen a film set in Toronto before, and being Canadian has always been lame as shit. And now it's cool because of Scott Pilgrim. I really liked what this show did, kind of skewering the idea of reboots, of legacy sequels, where it goes in a fully different direction. At first you think, oh, are they just retelling everything? And then, nope, they are absolutely not. It builds on the characters that you know, the situations that you know, and takes them in a completely new direction, almost asking the question, what if the 8th Evil X was actually Scott Pilgrim down the road? Very fascinating concept. Now, that said, it didn't capture some of the magic that I got from the filmmaking of Edgar Wright in that original. I'm going to give this one a very solid to strong 8 out of 10. Then I watched Smoking Causes Coughing, a film by Quentin Dupieux, one of the masters of the absurd. This is a parody of the Power Rangers, which follows a group called the Tobacco Force who fight the powers of evil and tell you that you should not smoke. It seems like a really fun concept at first. It's goofy, but then it goes off the rails, and I started wondering, why the hell is this a Power Rangers parody to begin with? We really don't need to be doing a Power Rangers parody right now. This story has nothing to do with that. And so I just found it to be a bit of a waste of a concept. You know, you take this really fun idea and you throw it out the window 20 minutes in. So I'm going to give this one a light 5 out of 10. Definitely had some fun moments, but outside of that, it could have been anything else. Then I watched Rotting in the Sun, a film by Sebastian Silva, which follows a filmmaker who goes to a gay nudist beach as a retreat because he is dealing with a lot of depression at the moment, and he meets an Instagram influencer, Jordan Firstman, and this influencer tells him, hey, we should make a project together. And then shit goes down. It was definitely not the movie that I expected it to be. It was very depressing and a little bit funny in how bold they went in that depressing direction, seeing as the main character of the film is the filmmaker behind it. and he is playing himself. There were some very bold choices that happened, and I respected the hell out of those bold choices. Jordan Firstman does a great job with this. That said, I definitely found it to drag a little bit at times. Sometimes they went so far into taking the joke seriously that it was just like lost the satire, kind of lost the humor. So I'm going to give this one a strong 6 out of 10. Then I watched R.M.N. This was one of the Cannes selections from last year. It is a Romanian film directed by Cristian Mungiu, who previously did 4 months, 3 weeks, 2 days. This is a story about fear, and specifically fear of the other. We start the film off with a young boy who sees something in the woods and then is told for the next 2 hours, there's nothing to fear, you didn't see anything, there's nothing wrong. And meanwhile, every adult around this child is deeply, deeply afraid of something even more irrational. They are all afraid of immigrants, which is one of the stupidest fears that anyone could have in this world, is being afraid of someone who is just like you but from a different place. And yet we see all of these adults who think that they are above fear being so afraid to the point of committing violence. About how fear can turn into hate very easily. This is a very strong one that I'm giving a strong 8 out of 10. Finally, last thing I watched this week was The 8 Mountains. This is an Italian film directed by the Belgian directors Felix van Groeningen and Charlotte van der Smeech. It follows 2 men who head up into the mountains and build a house together. 2 dudes who have been friends their whole lives, and they make a house together, and they're not gay. They're just 2 bros hanging out in a house in the mountains. It's solid. I mean, if you're looking for Eat, Pray, Love, but you think you're too good for Eat, Pray, Love, this is the movie for you. They drop tons of folk music needle drops. There are tons of beautiful landscapes because we're in this stunning mountain range. It's a very cottagecore movie. This movie seems like it should be right up my alley. I love beautiful images of nature. I love folk music, but honestly, I didn't get a ton out of this one. It still was very well made overall, but I was just kind of left at the end thinking, what was really the point of all of that? So to me, I'm going to give this one a mid to strong 6 out of 10. It was good, but I don't think I'd be compelled to go back to it.
Well, that is the conclusion of this week's What Have We Been Watching? And next week, we're going to have some, big hitters because I will finally be able to see Poor Things, and we will both be watching Wonka, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of other stuff in that episode.
Rebel Moon.
I won't have Rebel Moon, but you will have the beauty that is Zack Snyder's newest
on 70
masterpiece.
millimeter, I think. So that's going to be wild.
I hope that you get the Dune trailer before, just to compare Dune, Rebel Moon. What is the true desert movie?
Anyways, thank you so much, as always, for watching. Let us know what you've been watching this week down in the comments below. And as always, my name's Matt.
My name is Dyl, and this is Fantasy Filmball.